let's go then. I might just start right into the topic because it's very long. So contemporary neopagan movements have been developing on a global scale since about the late 1960s. One branch of these movements attempts to selectively recreate and reinterpret the Scandinavian or Norse folklore and mythology, combining it with various New Age concepts and other neopagan elements. In the academic discourse, we refer to such formations by using the term, this umbrella term of asatru. The term itself could be roughly translated to belief in the Aesir, who are a specific group of gods from Nordic or Scandinavian pre-Christian mythology. However, there is a great variety under this umbrella term regarding particular movements or even communities. This is due to the fact that the belief system is not standardized, nor it is centralized by any means. There is great differences between Icelandic and continental movements, and even greater variety within American communities. To keep my presentation within the required time frame, I will not discuss the US and the European movements, and I will only try to focus the very first officially recognized, or one of the very first officially recognized communities, the Icelandic Ásatrúarfélagið. Nonetheless, we need to mention a few names, researchers' names maybe, to illustrate how diverse the research is regarding asatru in an international scale. So the very first mentions of asatru in academic texts are credited to Jeffrey Kaplan and Matthias Garda. Both of these authors have mainly focused on American asatru. Following them, turning finally towards Iceland, we need to mention Stephanie von Schmerbein and of course Michael Strimska and Baldur Sigurvinsson. These are... Excuse me?
Carson?
Oh. Okay, that's nothing. Moving forward. After the second millennium, we see the thematic and methodological diversification of the field combined with wider perspectives regarding the research communities. Frederick Gregorius, for example, published the first comprehensive investigation of asatru and its history in Sweden in 2008. Simultaneously, a number of articles and chapters concerning asatru in Denmark were published, which used surveys to examine the expanding religious phenomenon. In the same time period, Dr. Jenny Blaine, a fantastic anthropologist, published a monograph on the use of cider or magic in American asatru in 2001. Edgar Stam, once again a very prominent and of course very known researcher, published what he described as a tentative introduction to asatru and its early developments in Norway in 2008. By the Icelandic movement, the first in-depth publication is due to Michael Strimska and his research done in 1997, I believe, yes, published in 2000, followed by a separate title in 2005. In 2000, Maria Erlendsdottir, who wrote her anthropology master's thesis in Iceland, in the University of Iceland, did also a limited yet still important field research regarding the situation of asatru in Iceland. Since 2005, Professor Terry Gunnell and his students from the University of Iceland, the University of Reykjavik to be precise, and his students such as Joshua Root have also published several papers and articles about asatru. Last but not least, we need to mention one of the conference's presenters, Ross Downing, whose 2017 master's thesis about the building and influence of the first Icelandic Asatru temple is yet again a foundational work. And finally, in 2018, after reading all these fantastic papers and all these fantastic monographs, I was finally able to conduct a field research myself in Iceland, focusing on the Ásatrúarfélagið, mainly the Reykjavik or the greater Reykjavik region and the Akranes community. During my almost 30-day stay, I have conducted a number of structured and semi-structured interviews with prominent members of the community and leaders of the community, as well as attended 2 ritual events, 1 special, and several regular communal meetings. Before we move any further, there are some general information about the movement that should be shared. The movement was officially established in 1972 by Sven-Georg Jettensson and his fellows such as Jörmundur Ingi Hansen or Jon fra Palmpotti. At this point, the movement's name was Forsidur, or Our Custom, or Our Tradition, roughly translated to English. A year later, on the 16th of May 1973, the community was recognized by the state as a religious organization. This came with the name change, of course, to Ásatrúarfélagið and the formal creation of priesthood and religious institutions. This means that the latter are not genuine products of the movement, but a quasi-forced framework by the Icelandic state, and it is very important when we analyze the Icelandic asatru movement to recognize this and how they, according to the interviews, suffer under these frameworks and these boundaries. In the following years, the movement's numbers didn't seem to grow that exponentially as in the past years. Other than the 11 founding members, only a few new faces appeared in the movement, and the movement seemed to stagnate in numbers. However, this all changed after the death of the founder Sven-György in 1993. To his last journey, more than 200 people accompanied him. After this, the membership numbers rose quickly, and it jumped to 320 people. This is due to the appearance of a newly elected leader, György, one of the founding members of the original organization. His charismatic and highly artistic appearance and the integration of performative and visual elements to the rituals led to an exponential growth, which invited the interest, of course, the academic circle. As you can see, after György was asked to step down in 2002, I will turn back to this later why this happened, in favor of Hilmar Örn-Hilmarsson, who is the current high priest in Iceland. The following numbers grew even faster, somewhere around 10 to 20% a year, which is absolutely fascinating if you consider it. In the last 2 decades, it reached 5,000 people, making the movement the biggest non-Christian congregation in Iceland. Now, considering this, there is no question why the movement get the interest of researchers. And of course, we have the first academic papers by our keynote speaker, Michael Strimska, and the other researcher, Maria Erensdottir, followed by several others. Now, there are some very interesting notes, that both Strimska and Erensdottir noted. Strimska noted that the movement was conceived in its original historical and cultural atmosphere, hence it had to put less emphasis on the recreational recreation aspect, as it was an inherent part of the cultural context, e.g. it could be found in folklore and all around its practitioners. He also mentioned that there is the mentioned double-layer internal structure, the enforced state hierarchy, and this recreated or inspired historical structure of Godi or priest jurisdictions. Strimska also happily notes that there are already actions in the early 2000s against racism and radicalism, mainly retaliation and precaution. At this certain point, we need to mention once again György Hansen, who had such contacts with political radicalism and alternative or far-right leaning ideologies. Thus, he was asked to step down in 2002. Strimska also mentions that there are no traces of millennialist elements in the Icelandic Asatru society. Yea, they do not await Ragnarok as it is in many American movements. It is very, very interesting how they reinterpret or exclude this aspect of Asatru compared to American movements, where it is very, very crucial, to put it this way. Of course, under György's lead, the movement had an extensive material toolkit during rituals, such as clothing, flags, idols, ritual tools, combined with articulated narrative elements, such as literature recitation or epic text recitations, and various creative elements were included, such as scribing or playing music on historically recreated musical tools. Regarding the ethical system, we found that somewhat he found a somewhat of an ethical universality with statements from prominent leaders such as "I believe in nothing," says the law speaker of the community. It is a very heavy statement that "I believe in nothing," and he is also, while he's also the law speaker of a religious congregation. Nonetheless, the closeness to nature, to old poetry, and the respect to the past is highly valued and considered a major cornerstone for the movement. Maria Erlendsdottir, in her research, came to a bit different conclusion. She highlighted the interpretative and creative aspects of the movement, emphasized the importance of individualism. In her understanding, the Ásatrúarfélag functions as a rally point for individuals with different motives. Firstly, it functions as a countercultural movement, especially within the disillusioned youth and especially against the Lutheran Church, the mainstream church in Iceland. Secondly, it provides a non-radical platform for utilizing nostalgia and romanticized nationalistic thought, but knowingly distances itself from alt-right or extreme ideologies. In this sense, the movement is yet again trying to be as contemporary as possible, rather than reigniting a long bygone faith, as some of the alt-right-leaning or right-leaning movements would define themselves. These motives are reflected regarding the structure. They are intentionally avoiding missions or proselytization, and because their following or their following basis cannot be efficiently reached through these channels and through these methods, they rather use alternative ways, such as historic reenactment, cultural production, countercultural self-identification, or liberal attitudes in controversial questions such as universalism, such as the LGBTQ plus issue. Turning back to the contemporary aspect again, the movement utilizes some of the inspired or even inventive traditions to better suit for their target demographic. As an example, the organization invented a quasi-baptism similar to the Christian churches, during which the parent may introduce and celebrate their newly born offspring. Their active utilization of romanticized thought can be found in their workshops, their poetic workshops, during which they write or recite medieval-inspired new poetic texts, and do craftsmanship and workshops, recreating clothing, for example, or even ritual tools. I found it very, very interesting during my research. So considering all these findings in the prior titles, one might understand how high my expectations were before visiting this country and before visiting this religious community. I was expecting regular events, active public participation, emphasis on visual and artistic elements during ceremonies, and to see high levels of religious participation from the membership. However, it seemed that reality is quite a bit different. The rituals were visited by only a few dozen of individuals. They were short, they were simplified. The events lacked the expected creative elements. The visual and material dimensions felt empty. The Yule event, which is the winter solstice celebration, took somewhere around 30 minutes. It was extremely short. And during my short trip, I realized that something changed radically in the last 2 decades in this community. And I was fascinated, and I was extremely interested to see what has changed. In the following slides, I will try to, selectively collect a few reasons. One of them, of course, will be the alt-right emergence and the hijacking of Nordic imagery, which is quite a massive issue in asatru research as a complex. I believe that the audience will recognize these symbols and how they interpreted in alt-right circles. The hijacking of, for example, bind runes in generally speaking, or the appearances or romanticized signs and representative forms in alt-right movements pose an affiliated threat to the asatru society in Iceland, and they want to distance themselves from these very, very troublesome and very, very harmful influences and associations. Secondly, we need to mention the commercialization of Norse mythology, even in Iceland. As you can see in the pictures, these were taken sorry, so I should jump. These were taken in Iceland. You can buy these very, very cute knitted horned helmets, which are the absolute aim of any historian or any scholar of academic study of religion. Of course, when you walk on the main streets of Iceland, you will find statues, wooden statues in souvenir shops depicting these warriors of Iceland and Thor and Odin and all these gods. Once again, we see that this commercialization of Norse mythology devalued the usage of historical items and created such associative bonds that were not fitting for the Ásatrúarfélag at that time. Their original
You have 5 minutes, Mark.
5 minutes, okay. Yes. I will hurry up. So their original meanings and functionalities of these ritual items were overshadowed by these consumer items. And of course, we need to mention the pop culture effects, such as the Marvel productions or these historically inspired series, such as the Viking series, for example. No question that these did not serve the aims of a religious association with the highest respect for historical traditions and heritage in Iceland. Finally, for the third reason, we need to mention or evaluate the evolution of the movement itself. Over the past 50 years, at least one, if not two generations would have grown up in asatru, forcing it to adapt to the changes and challenges posed by a new demographic cohort. Young children could not stay long in freezing winter forests, for example, or drink mead during ceremonies. The general population visiting the rituals grew, and of course, turning back to the youth, they wanted to join these religious processions and religious events. Hence, the Ásatrúarfélag had to recreate some ritual tools for them as well. Hence, the movement adapted by, for example, moving inside during winter time, including ritual elements for children such as the image right here. So, through these challenges, the Ásatrúarfélag changed in a very unique and locally fitting way. The movement stripped all its miscellaneous elements, which could have connected them with unwanted attention. They focused on creating an atmosphere for fulfilling the actual community's needs. However, this isolationism also produced a certain level of mystical fog around the movement. The distance both from Europe and the US and its genuine background created a quasi-authority for the movement. Other communities looked at the Ásatrúarfélag as an example worthy of following. To further elevate this process, the construction of a new communal space, e.a. the temple, created heated international response. Countless articles about the first oath or temple in 1,000 years or the return of the Viking faith have appeared. This unwanted media attention and the grand expectations combined with it, with a sense of authority, created a so-called hidden Mecca effect towards Iceland and towards the Ásatrúarfélag. As an example, during the building process, they received hundreds of bookings, nonsensical bookings to be precise, for rituals, weddings, special events from overseas, especially from America, as well as questions regarding the interior of the Hof. What deities will be represented? How many idols will the Hof have? Which internationally revered author will or craftsman will do the decorations? Will there be a space for sacrifices? And so on and so on. Of course, the Ásatrúarfélag tried, or the representatives tried to answer to these questions and try to avoid this unwanted spotlight, refusing any overseas offerings or requests or offers, just as a precaution. Rather than focusing outwards, the Ásatrúarfélag tried to, and still tries to, fulfill the needs of their local communities, while also working in a state-enforced framework. Their authenticity in local space give them a stable basis of new members year by year, even ones who are, for example, devout Christians, but interested in cultural heritage or heritage keeping. According to Márk, the current high priest, only a small fraction of the Ásatrúarfélag is actually asatru believer. The majority only supports the movement by affiliating them on paper right now online forms, hence funding the association through their tax portions. The countercultural aspect is once again an important factor that we need to consider, as the religious organization functions as a platform for rallying against mainstream organizations such as the Lutheran Church of Iceland or radical political ideologies. The movement is considered a genuine universalist one. They support other marginalized segments of society, such as the LGBTQIA+ community, by offering marriage ceremonies, for example, to them, and even congregational memberships, which some other churches might not provide. On an international level, the movement tries to remove itself from any international conflicts. However, they actively step up against folkism or outright appropriation. The general attitude can be summarized easily by quoting the High Priest Hilmar's words: "Leave us out from these issues. We are not in the position to tell you how to live their lives as heathens, but we expect them to do the same." Summarizing my findings, I was expecting grand ceremonies, intense religious participation, and maybe seeing some else during my field research. However, what I have found can be considered even more exciting: the remains of a formally decorated structure that looks inwards rather than outwards in these days. That presence within the local community is apparent, however, it only affects a small fraction of society, the outcasts and the marginalized ones. The movement is not just a religious congregation, it's a cultural rally point for Icelanders, through which they can connect with their historical heritage while also remaining open and inclusive towards others. And with this end note, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you.